Good evening and welcome again to Body Language. Now tonight we're going to take a look at what people do at parties when they meet each other and check each other out. We're going to analyse handshakes and what some of the hidden meanings are you find behind them. And we're going to introduce you to talk language, where we're going to show you how to read between the lines what people actually say when they're trying to put it over you. Now we know with human communication that when you're face to face, there's three things you use to put your message over. Now the first thing is words. That's what you actually say. And we can take that and write it on a piece of paper. The second thing is the way you sound, what we call the vocal element. And the third thing is the way you gesture, the way you move, and the way you look, what's commonly called body language. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. When you had the last conversation with somebody, which would have been only a short time ago, what percentage of the time do you think you would have been relying on what you actually said, that is, the words, to make your message go across? What do you think? Who thinks it'd be at least, say, 50% of the impact was on words? Put your hand up. Who thinks it'd be less than 50% for words? Anybody doesn't think? Let's take the second element, the way you sound, the tone of voice. Who thinks that accounts for at least, say 50% of how effective you are? Okay. Who thinks it'd be less than 50? Okay, the body language, the way you look, gesture and move. Who thinks that accounts for at least, say, 50%? Who thinks it'd be less than 50? Okay. Studies show that face-to-face, what you actually say, that is, the words themselves, account for 7 to 10% of your impact. In other words, people don't listen to what you say. They just don't listen. They act on what they think they hear you mean and what they think you want by the way you look. Now, let me demonstrate that. What's your first name, please?
James.
Give him a big hand, James. Come up here if you will. Always got to get the tallest person in the room. Yeah. OK, I'm going to ask you 10 questions, James. Nobody's ever got 10 out of 10 right. Listen to the questions, listen to the answers, and answer them yourself in your own mind. Now, this shows people don't listen to what you say, they act on what they think is going on and what they think you mean. 10 questions from 0 to 10. Here we go. You ready?
Yeah. Question
number 1. What's your full name?
James Irving France.
Correct. Never make the first question you ask somebody new one to which they don't know the answer. If they say, I don't know, they feel dumb. Question number 2. Here we go, right through to 10. This tie is made of silk. Spell silk.
S-L-I-K.
Not close.
I saw the old cow. Let's try it again.
What do cows drink?
Milk.
Now sit down, they drink water.
Sorry. Little cows drink milk.
Little cows don't drink milk. Now, all right, be fair. Be honest. Who thinks cows drink milk? Put your hand up. Come on, be honest. Who thought the answer was milk? Come on. Yeah, that's your first response. Your second response is little cows drink milk. You try to rationalise why you're an idiot, correct? Want a second go? Come up, I'll give you a second.
Okay. This is glutton for punishment.
All right. Now, so far, you got your name right. All right. Here we go. Now, this time I'm going to gesture and move. How many animals of each species did Moses take on the ark?
Oh, 2.
Sit down. It wasn't Moses, it was Noah. Now, here's the problem you've got dealing with people. Most people think cows drink milk, and Moses had an ark. That's the problem you got dealing with them. Now, the follow-up to the subject body language was this book called Talk Language. Now, what I did with this was to analyse the 20 to 30% impact of what you say and the 7 to 10% of words. And what we discovered was that in the English language there are 550 clichés. Now, cliché is pre-packaged words. You learn these things. And you use them when you want to cover up what you're really thinking. Now, a couple of simple examples of these can be seen at places like airports. So I flew on a plane today. Now, the fear of flying, which is in the book of lists, is listed at number 8. We don't like flying in aeroplanes. Now, the fear of dying is number 7. Anybody know the number 1 fear of Western man? Public speaking. Speaking in front of a group. You'd rather die 7 times more and go up on a plane than come up here right now and talk to the group, is what that means. Now, even though the fear of flying is number 8, when you go to any airport, they do and say things with the clichés they use that encourage you never to fly again. Now, they've spent millions to get you out there in the first place. Here you are, you drive out to the airport. You're reassuring yourself it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay. And as soon as you get to the airport, what have they put there for you to see? Right across the top of the airport, 25 feet high in most countries, the word terminal. Now think about this. You think cows drink milk, you think Moses had an ark. What do you think happens to your body when you see the word terminal? What do you think of? You think of, you're dead, finished. And then you get on the planes and they still give first-time flyers impossible things that you can't do. Such things as put your seat back forward. Now, which way does it go if you don't fly? If they're late, they reassure you by saying, we should have you in the air momentarily. Split second, right? We're going to be landing shortly. Now, how long is the runway going to be? Shortly. Now, one thing you won't hear on Australian Airlines, or Ansett Airlines, is the following cliche that you'll hear on most international airlines. They say, ladies and gentlemen, in the event of a depressurisation. Now, what do you imagine is going to happen to you? What do you think? Yeah, OK, the windows have popped out. The plane is plummeting towards the ground in a death plunge. This is what you picture, but they say no need to worry because these masks will appear. And during this death plunge, with the windows gone, place the mask over your mouth and breathe normally. One airline used to say there'd be no smoking in the rear. The best one of all, you hear this on most airlines. I can remember one night in turbulence, we were bouncing around the sky trying to find a hole to park this crate. And we're going down like this and people were scared and people were sick and the captain came on to reassure us by saying, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry about the turbulence, but I can assure you this will be our final approach. Now here's the way it works with cliches. I first became aware of this when I heard the following conversation between a fruit shop owner and a 5-year-old boy. The 5-year-old boy had said to the fruit shop owner, what are all those red berries? And he pointed to all these red berries. The answer was, son, they're not red berries, they're blackberries. They're only red because they're green. Now, this is the sort of language that we're dealing with. Now, here's the way it works. I decide I'm not going to tell you the truth because I can't afford to tell you the truth, or I don't want to tell you the truth, or I don't think you should know. So because I'm going to tell a lie, my brain says, now, wait on, let's have some of these cliches that'll try to be as honest as we're going to lie. And I'll start popping some of the following statements if I'm going to lie to you. They include, well, to be perfectly honest. Now, how many times have you heard somebody say to you, look, to be perfectly honest, and you know here inside that they're not telling you the truth? They say things like, well, look, to be frank, meaning I haven't been frank up until now. Look, in all sincerity, and then they stick the boot into you. And the granddaddy of all these is with all due respect. Now, what does that mean? They've got no respect, have they? Now, with all due respect, there's a softness. If I said, for example, Derek, you're a fool, he might come and belt me, and I can't afford to take that chance. So now I use a softener. I say, Derek, let me say, with all due respect, mate, that you're a fool. Now he starts thinking, well, at least Allan respects me for being a fool. So I've used a softener to manipulate it. Now, if it wasn't for these cliches, most politicians would not have much to talk about, am I right? Because anywhere between 50% and 100% of a political speech can be cliches. Now, some of the favourites include one that means, I resent that question. The cliche is, with a smile, let me make one point perfectly clear. At this point in time is a good one because that means 5 minutes from now it's not true anymore. It's only at this point in time. Obviously is a good one. Now, obviously means if you don't agree with me, you're a fool, and clearly covers the same thing. One that's a joiner, joins together irrelevant thoughts that don't have anything to do with each other. And having said that, let me say this. Yeah. There's a very clever one that goes this way. I would say this, and that's good because you're not saying it. Therefore, there's no liability attached to it. You never did say it. There's no promise you ever will, but you would. You say to a leading political figure with the government, what's your opinion of the opposition leader? You might get the following response. Well, that's a good point you've raised there, Allan. Let me make one point perfectly clear with respect to that statement. Having said that, I want to say this now and make it clear to all concerned so there's no misinterpretation of the facts of what's been stated here today. That obviously, as I understand it to be the case, and don't quote me as having said that, but I believe and always will believe, with all due respect to the man and the question you've raised, and that question is, why did you want to know this, correct? What do you got? Nothing. But it doesn't matter. 60 to 80% of your impact is the way you look and move. 20 to 30% is the way you sound. Provided you gesture and move, you can get away with almost anything these days. Here's a collection of some of the more popular cliches that you might hear.
In other words,
I want to tell you,
we did not repeat. Did not.
But obviously.
obviously, that goes without saying.
And I want to say this to you.
I think it's fair to say.
There's nothing I can say.
Well, let me just say, no, that is not true at all.
I think you'll find that,
We still believe
and I feel fairly confident,
and always will believe.
the reality is
and I again say,
Well, clearly the government's in breach of the policy.
But obviously...
We have, for the time being,
Considerable sympathy.
At this point of time.
We hope to reach a START agreement this year.
let me first put the position as concisely as possible.
I've got no doubt that we will have probably amongst the lowest rates of tax in the world without a consumption tax.
Goodness only knows, I can't understand it.
I don't think it's appropriate to speculate at this stage on that.
In other words,
I want to say, no, it's not dead. Obviously, there's a desire to discuss this issue.
in other words,
Put it this way, I'll be around a long time, and I guess you'll be looking for me much more than even you're looking for me now.
Now, that last man, Sir Joe, never used any of the cliches in talk language. He used fillers. Now, a filler is where someone puts a microphone in front of you. You must open your mouth and some noise has got to come out before you say what you want to say. Remember, he had three favourite fillers. Remember what they were? My goodness gracious me. Don't you worry about that. And the last one was, you mark my words. Now, you'd say to Sir Joe, what do you think about the government? Oh, you mark my word, don't you worry about that. My goodness me, they're crooks. So he calls a spade and axe, hits you on the head with it. I'm going to show you now a collection of cliches that he made up himself. We couldn't understand it, maybe you can.
Made them move faster than a bee in a bottle.
You mark my words.
You mark my words. You can't chase two hares. You either leave one and lose the other. Everything's going ordinary, according to the way it ought to go, as far as I'm concerned.
I'm not interested in talking of that silly nonsense.
Because they shoot themselves in the feet and they shoot their own ship.
They don't like me, they hate me.
Just to take one look at them, you could sum them up. I wouldn't have them to tie up my shoestring.
Goodness me.
Yeah, you haven't woken up yet. I've been there, I'm there now, I know.
The point is, there's no need to go into that today.
Go and jump into the lake.
I do not accept any blame. I never intend to and never have to.
You mark my words. Don't try and walk with a foot on each side of a barbed wire fence. It's pretty uncomfortable.
Everybody take your right hand and hold it in front like this. Now hold it across on top of the left knee of the person beside you. The left knee. Now put it on the top of their knee, rub it just back and forth a few times. Okay, cut. What you were doing then was using the ancient speaking tools of the hands. This is what we used to speak with before we learned to verbally speak. And you were placing it in an intimate zone. Now, there are certain places you can and can't touch people. Depends on your relationship. Depends on whether they're male or female. Let me demonstrate this. Can I ask you to come up here, please? Now, with a woman, for example, we know that studies show women touch each other from the hand to the point of the elbow is the prime touching zone, so they'll talk like this. The secondary touching zone's from there to there, and women can touch each other on the face. Okay, thank you. Come back up here, James. Oh. Yeah. So far you got your name right.
Spelling's a bit rough, eh?
That's it, do you jack it up, that's a good boy. Okay. One thing we know about research with men, particularly English-speaking men, the only place you can touch them as a man is between the elbow and the shoulder. That's it. Now, if, for example, he was a friend of mine, I could say he's a friend of mine and I really like him. I can touch him there and there. I couldn't say he's a friend of mine and I really like him. I'm not allowed to do that. All right, now where do you touch somebody you've just met, a stranger, who you want to impress and get on with? Well, we know from studies that waiters who touch patrons between the elbow and the shoulder when they're explaining a wine menu or when they're explaining the food and asking how do they like the service, get 5 to 10 times the tips of the waiters who don't touch at all. We know that librarians who ask the following question, you will have the book back on time, won't you? When they touched in this neutral touching zone from here to here, got 4 times the response rate than those who didn't touch at all. So this is a neutral touching zone. Okay, how do you spell milk before you go?
Oh, I couldn't tell you that.
He's not going. What about touching on top of the head? How do you feel when someone does this to you? Now, head touching is a very demeaning gesture, and people still do it to kids. There are only certain people who are allowed to touch us on the head in English-speaking society. Now, never touch Chinese on the top of the head. It's a religious insult. Have a look at this. You'll see people who can touch. Now, this man has the authority to touch. Touching on the head for blessing is a very ancient gesture. Now, it's something that we should avoid. Now, what happens when politicians start doing this sort of affair? They seem to be under the impression that everybody they touch will give them a vote. One touch, one vote. 2 touches on the one head, maybe you get 3 votes. But all politicians seem to do this everywhere. The more votes you want, the more you touch. And when you're really desperate for a vote, you can always go for the donkey vote. Something else we know about touching is this thing called a handshake. Hello? 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 You're allowed to touch on the hands when you meet somebody. Now, one thing you'll learn about hand touching is this. When men meet other men, hello there, single-hander, single-hander for this man, single-hander for this man. Now I see a woman I like. She gets a double-hander. Again, single. G'day, mate. Hello there. G'day, mate. Have a look at the screen. Here is somebody who has a reputation of being a ladies' man. Single-hander for Joe. Single-hander for this fella. Joe doesn't even want to know about that. Now, what's Bob Hawke when he meets Mr. Schultz in America? Single-hander. Now he meets his wife. Hello, darling, double-hander. Through the front door he comes, meets the woman in blue. She gets a double-hander. Another man who gets a single-hander, and he's not even looking at him, he's looking at the woman who gets a double-hander. Okay, what happens if you're a well-known person like royalty or politician? You're meeting the crowds, and all of a sudden someone's got you in a handshake and won't let you go. How do you get away? What sort of technique do you or don't you have? Here's a couple of very well-known identities. Let me show you what they do. Now, Andrew Peacock's never had a technique for getting away. He tries to break with his left hand. Watch this. No, she's not letting him go. You're staying right there, fella. So all he does is try to walk off and take her with him. Now, here is an expert in handshake release techniques. He's been locked in this one for about 90 seconds. Now, what Charles does, he changes the subject and pretends to pull his hand out and point over in the distance. Changes the subject, pulls the hand out, and, oh, it's over there. Now, in this next scene, this woman's got hold of Bob Hawke's coat tail. Now, he knows he's trapped and she's not going to let him go. But he's got to move on. Now, notice the solid brick wall behind them. Now, someone has said, move on. Now, his first strategy is to try to push her forward to break the grip. Now, I want you to watch behind her as they come forward. Watch what she does as he pushes her. Here comes her left hand, got him. Now, her right hand, got him in a lock. He tries to do a sudden right-hand turn. She does a right-hand turn with him and they both walk into the red brick wall. Now, it's also possible to learn someone's occupation through the style of handshake they've got. Can I ask you to come up here for a second, please? Thank you.
No problem at all.
For example, we found that research with the railways discovered they've got their own special handshake, as do the Sawmillers Association. Just last week we were talking with the Milk Marketing Board, the dairy farm. Give a big hand, ladies and gentlemen.